Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and Shelley Epperly here. Today is Monday, February the 25th, 2019. It is 8 p.m. in New York, 5 p.m. in Los Angeles. It's 1 a.m. in London, and Sydney, Australia is at 12 noon. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy, and I'm pleased and proud to be doing another Monday evening show with my friend Shelley, who is enjoying the fact that Oregon, which almost never gets snow, is enjoying a little bit of snow. So that kind of spices things up a little bit for the winter time for you guys, doesn't it? Because it's usually just kind of gray there, but this year you get a little white. That's nice.
Yeah, it's just been spitting snow. We had a little stick this morning. And Oregon does get a lot of snow, but I'm just over the border in Washington, and where I'm at, we usually don't get snow. But
okay.
There are plenty of places in Oregon that get tons of snow, and
that's
I know
true.
that
Mountainous areas. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. Actually, I think Eugene got dumped on today, which is kind of So that's kind of a different thing for them. But
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually the big cities don't get it, but the mountain areas for sure. And obviously as you get closer and closer to the Cascades up north, and that makes a difference. But
right.
I remember my 1 year living in Oregon. Of course, I was in southern Oregon, but I don't think it snowed once. It was just gray all the time. It was just gray.
Yeah, in the wintertime, usually that is what it is. It's just when we moved here in 2010, in November of 2010, and Mount Hood is very prominent in the Portland area. You can see it from lots of places. And it took us 5 weeks to see Mount Hood because it was so rainy that winter that we moved here and it took us 5 weeks to see it. It was kind of sad, but it was a pretty wet winter that winter. So
it reminds me of the year, this is a number of years back, probably 14 years ago, something like that. Louise and I flew out to Seattle and spent a week there. And all the time that we were there, Rainier was clouded in. We never saw it until we got on the plane and come back. And Louise said, "Oh my God, look at that!" Because of course it's right there. You can't miss it when there's no cloud cover, no fog in. But the entire time we were there, it was amazing. You could see like a little piece of it one time, but that was about it. It was just fogged in. Not that we didn't have a good time. It was a great week, actually. We had a wonderful time. But it would have been nice to have Rainier kind of raining over the whole thing during the whole stay.
Yeah.
The most memorable thing about the trip was, what's the name of the market? Pike's? Is that the name?
Pike Place Market?
Pike Place Market, yeah. Really good fruit and vegetable vendors there. And for whatever reason, the nectarines that year were absolutely sweet as can possibly be. So every day we went to the Pike's Market in order to get a nectarine and cut it up and share it. And they were huge, too. I mean, you could have them for lunch. That's how big they were. But that was they were sweeter than most peaches. Of course, nectarines come off a peach tree, but even so, they were just amazing that year. So that was the big thing to think about. I mean, not that the rest of the city wasn't good. It was. It's just that for some reason the nectarines that year were delicious. So I remember that to this day.
Yeah.
So let's see. We are doing a Q&A. I don't know how much activity we're going to get from listeners, so we may be kind of generating our own questions, but that's always fun. Kind of keeps us on our toes. This is like doing graduate level law of attraction, trying to challenge each other to improve our skills and so forth. That's always a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. I listened to the podcast this morning, and I just loved her. The gal you had on there,
Daisy Joplin.
Daisy.
Yeah.
She was a lot of fun to listen to. I was doing my yoga and my morning coffee and all that while I was listening to you guys. And
did you get a chance to listen to any of her tunes? Did you listen to any of her YouTubes or anything?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you got to do it. She is a phenomenal violinist. Really, really good. She's quick. She is energetic. I mean, she has a lot of energy up on stage, and you can really see it in the videos. So do yourself a favor. It's kind of a treat to watch her. It's kind of like watching, I don't know, a train racing downhill or something like that. That's how quick the whole thing gets.
That's awesome. My son plays the cello, so I've been to plenty of orchestra concerts
in
the last few years. Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he wanted to play the cello in 5th grade. That's when they were introduced to orchestra. And I said, why do you want to play the cello? And he said, because I can play Jaws on it. You know, the Jaws. I was like, okay, we'll go rent a cello so you can play Jaws. but he's just a natural with music, so it's pretty great. Yeah.
Well, cello is definitely becoming more and more of a cool instrument ever since Yo-Yo Ma came along, because he made the cello certainly into an art form, one of the best cellists of all time. But he made it cool so that kids would want to play cello. Because I remember there was a time when nobody wanted to learn cello, like when I was in school. I mean, that was like the one that you were given if, you know, you were the last person there and they ran out of violins. You know? That was just, it was not something most people wanted. But cello today is cool. Cello is definitely something people like. So, and good stuff has been written for it, too.
Yeah. We've kind of toyed around with getting him one, but they're expensive.
Oh, yeah.
They're like $2,000. I'm like, maybe that'll be your graduation present or something. That's a lot of money to fork out.
It is, yeah. They aren't cheap. That's, well, you
like
know.
Like a used car.
This is where he, if he really, really wants to get it, he just has to apply what his mom has been teaching him about the law of attraction. That's all. He's just got to attract it. So, that's it.
Yeah, he's working on attracting his orchestra band trip to Southern California right now, so.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I remember you talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing pretty good with that, so.
Good for him. Good. All right. So let's see. Yeah. What kinds of, let's see if we can stump each other with some really challenging, tough questions about how to apply law of attraction, or actually it can be almost about anything, because one of my favorite topics, or one of my favorite points, is that the law of attraction applies in every area of life. So this is really an opportunity to bring up a question about anything in life, which is kind of fun. We can just kind of shoot the moon.
Well, I have just found it very helpful because I'm constantly commenting on posts on different law of attraction sites of people that are just looking for help or wanting to, you know, attract their soulmate, or, you know, they want to, you know, lose 20 pounds, or they want, you know, $1,500 by Friday, or whatever their thing is I'm just starting to really focus in on whatever you want. You have to love what you already have in that category in your life. So if you want more money, you have to love the money that's already there. And if you want a soulmate, you have to love yourself, because if you don't love yourself, how do you expect anyone else to? You know, and if you want a healthier body, you have to love what is already great about your body, because you might be overweight, or you might be diabetic, or you might be, you know, chronically sick all the time for whatever reason, allergies or something. But there's all these other things going on in your body that are going great. Mm-hmm. And you have to focus in on those. So I've really been like just pushing love, or whatever you want to say, but it's just like, you know, I'm finding it easier and easier to kind of let go of the people that you just can't help. You know, there's people that are out there that, you know, cause that's what I'm passionate about, is I just love helping people. I love, you know, having somebody go, oh my God, that worked, like it clicking for them, like it's clicked for me so many times, you know, so, but I always kind of get either frustrated or irritated. I guess that's kind of the one and the same, but when people are like, well, I can't do that, I don't have any money, you know, how can I be thankful for my money when I don't have any money? And it's like, well, you're, you know, obviously paying for whatever device you're talking to me on, so you have some money, like somebody, and if it's not your money, you should be grateful for the money that someone's giving you to pay for whatever, you know, obviously you're alive, so you're eating, you're on some sort of device talking on Facebook, you're, you know, you're not freezing to death right now because you're talking to me on Facebook. You know, so it's just like, you know, you just have to get grateful for even that little teeny tiny bit that you have, you know, and until you can do that and take responsibility for yourself. So then I I'm getting to the point where I'm just like, okay, I just need to let them go because they're on their path and I don't need to feel like I have to change them because they're not ready for it. And so that's just been a good lesson for me to do that. So.
Yeah, it's good practice. I agree with you. I mean, I haven't spent as much time lately as I often like to do on Facebook doing exactly what you're doing. But I find that it's a great opportunity to practice not getting wrapped up in somebody else's thing, not taking their angst or anxiety onto myself, but instead using it as the opportunity to practice, focusing and passing love their way, focusing on high vibration stuff that feels good and passing it their way, and being willing to accept one way or another. Either way, either they're going to accept what I'm giving them or they're not. And if they don't, okay, I learned to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just, you can only go so far. Plus, I loved what Louie and Daisy were talking about this morning. They were really emphasizing how when Daisy was talking about how she lives in Peekskill, New York, which is just north of New York City. And when she goes into the city to do work or to pursue projects and so forth, she sees a lot of homeless people. And she's gotten to the point now where she just sends love their way and she gets so excited for them, which is a really interesting reaction to get so excited for them because she figures that with all they're going through with this rough experience, they're setting themselves up for some absolutely monumental attraction later on. And it's a great way to look at things because we can easily get caught up in the anxiety of others, but she's found a way to turn it into getting excited for what people are going through. Which isn't always a popular thing for people to hear. I mean, we say that among ourselves because we're deliberate creators and we understand this stuff and so forth, but you tell that to somebody in the general population at large and they think that you're unfeeling and uncaring and basically a miserable or whatever, So it's something you don't necessarily announce to the world all the time, but but it is a good practice. It's a very good practice to constantly be looking for ways to see even the most difficult situations in a positive light. It's a good thing to practice. That's what I'm finding. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of homeless people in our immediate neighborhood. I mean, if I go down to Hartford, I can find some. I imagine you probably don't have any in your immediate neighborhood either, but,
not in my immediate neighborhood, but, definitely down the road.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, the mall's probably like 5 or 10 minutes from here, and there's, that's where you start seeing a lot of people hanging out. There's, the buses, the main hubs for the buses are at the mall and stuff, and, not that just homeless people ride the bus or whatever, but it's a big problem in this area. I'm on a couple of groups where the people are, it's called Neighbors Helping Neighbors in Vancouver, Washington. And a lot of people get on there and they're just like, I literally have nowhere to stay tonight. It's supposed to get down to 20, can somebody help me, and in those situations, and I get so, in my younger years, I would get over involved with people like that. I'd be like, we need to help them. Let's bring them some food, and I'm still like that, but I'm also like, I just feel like you can't bring those people into your home because you don't know them. Like it would be a different situation if a friend of mine called and said, I know you guys have an extra bedroom and my brother is in a really bad, he just lost his job and, if it was like kind of a trusted situation like that, but you can't just bring people into your home and it's heartbreaking to read that stuff. And then all these people are on there going, well, there's a warming center at this church and this, if you can get over to the blah, 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 they can help you with clothes and, there's lots of resources, and then there's the people that are just like, I'm living in my motorhome. Can somebody bring me some gas? And it's like, well, are you, okay? Well, yeah, I just lost my job. Well, go find another job. Like that's the thing about this area is there's so many jobs. If you can't find a job, you're not looking for a job,
Really?
Yeah, and I mean, they're not all great, but there's call center jobs where you can make like, 12 or $15 an hour plus get bonuses for whatever, it's not the most ideal work for everybody, but if you need to support yourself, It's
Yeah.
a start. And what you were talking about with the homeless people, have you watched the movie Conversations with God with Neil Donald Walsh?
No, I haven't. I've read the books, but I haven't seen the movie at all.
Yeah, he's got a movie out and it's just about his life. And he was in Ashland, Oregon. And I think he lives in Central Point, which is kind of a little offshoot of Medford too.
Right.
But yeah, it was just interesting because he was literally homeless. Like,
Oh, yeah.
he was living in the park in Ashland, and then he worked his way through and then basically just started to give up again and just said, God, what the hell am I supposed to do here? And then he started hearing what God was saying to him, which was, pretty cool. I mean, some people, like you said, some people might think it's all woo woo or whatever, but look at Abraham, look at the Seth books, all of that, people get messages from all of that. So it's pretty amazing, but,
It's amazing how many of these stories involve letting go of something, letting go of giving up on something, quitting. Not giving up on life, not giving up on, trying to get into a better place or something like that, but giving up on anxiety related to something or other. It plays a major role in Neil Donald Walsh's own stories about himself and his explorations with God. But it also, or conversations with God, actually. But it also shows up in so many other people who are in the secret, people who went through all kinds of very, very difficult things. In some cases, homelessness. I think of also Joel Elston. He went through homelessness. He went through gambling addiction. He went through a whole series of things. He was in prison at one point. He just dealt with all these other things. Very, very adverse situations. And he's the first person who will tell you that was the best thing that ever happened to him.
Yeah.
Not that he loved it at the time. He didn't like it at the time. Nobody likes it at the time, but it turned into something really great for him. And it certainly did. Boy, read his book and you really get a sense for it.
Yeah.
The thing about people who are in those difficult situations is that our hearts go out to them. And I mean, clearly there are situations like you're describing, people who are looking for a place to stay warm tonight and they know it's going to be very, very cold. That's a very imminent emergency type situation. And certainly that's somebody who needs a little direct intervention. But most of the time it's about giving people the support to start believing in themselves. Usually it's not, they're up against the wall tonight and they're basically going to freeze to death unless something happens.
Right.
Most of the time it's people who, for various reasons, and we've all been there, just don't really have the wherewithal at the moment to look beyond the difficulty of what they're dealing with, because of depression or fear or anger or something along that line, some issue that gets in the way. And when they're in that place, I mean, I know I've done this, I know you've done this in the Facebook groups, just reminding people what's going right, what's going well in their lives is often enough to kind of get people unstuck. And I agree with you. That's where it gets fun. That's where you feel like you really helped somebody, because they'll come back and they'll say, oh, you know what? I completely forgotten about that. You're right. And just that little jarring of the memory makes a huge, huge difference. So.
Well, and I think that there's a really fine balance between, like sympathizing with them and going, almost to the point of like where you're like, that really sucks, that's happening to you. But, there's all this other stuff, and here's the proof that there's all this other stuff.
Right.
And I find myself getting better at that too, where before I was just like, well, this is what you need to do. Like, stop doing that and do this instead. And it's like, some of those people just really need to know, like, what you're going through, that's horrible. You just lost your job and you're getting evicted and you're, the whole scenario, like, I need, $500 by Friday or whatever, I'm going to get evicted. Number one, that didn't just happen today. If you are getting evicted on Friday, this has been a long time coming, and to go on Facebook and ask strangers to do that. Number one, I know that if I needed $500 by Friday or I was going to be evicted, I have a lot of resources before I would ever go on Facebook and ask for that. And I just feel like, what bridges have you burned? But then just to get them to listen to you, I feel like you need to be a little sympathetic, like, oh my God, that's too bad. But what are your options? Like, there's got to be some options. You're not going to live, in a cardboard box tonight, right? Like, you have somewhere to stay, like, just start feeling out the good stuff. And a lot of times I'll private message those people, cause they don't want to put all their stuff out there for everybody or whatever. And, there's been people that I've just helped and they're like, wow, you really helped. And they'll get a hold of me like a week later and, you were right. That really worked. Thank you so much. Other people I don't hear from. Other people I'm like in constant contact with and they've become, friends and stuff. So I just love it. But like what you said, even in this capacity, I just feel like it's really great to just kind of let go and surrender from all of that. Where in my younger years, like I said, I would get over involved and be like, we gotta, take the, my husband was always like putting the brakes on. No, we're not bringing these people home. We don't know these people. We have little kids, I'm like, yeah, you're right. But what do we do? It's like, I don't know. It's just an interesting, like, wisdom and maturity that you get with helping people, where at first you kind of get over involved and then almost resentful sometimes when they don't take your advice or they, go back to that guy or they, and that just happens in life with friends and family, when you get frustrated with someone because they're just doing the same thing over and over again, and, or whatever. But, yeah, it's just, it's cool to be where I'm at with all of that because it's just a lot more fun and I feel like I'm just helping a lot more people. But
that's good.
I had a subject that I wanted to talk about, but for the life of me, I cannot remember what it is.
Well, that's right. It'll come to you and it's going good time. I wanted to add something actually. We talk often about how, it's a good idea to stay away from newscasts and news related stuff. Just taking your mind off of it entirely. I have to also say, though, that lately I have been using news as a way to test my strength, to test my limits. Not for the purpose of getting inundated with all the terrible things going on, but simply how much can I expose myself to it and not let it affect me? Not, and even better, and I'm doing this a little bit more and more each time, how much of that time can I spend actually putting out love to somebody who I don't really like what they're all about in the news report. Whether it be political statements or lifestyle or whatever it might be, can I get myself to a place to put that out to them like that? And it becomes, it's actually kind of similar to dealing with people on Facebook because either one of them can be toxic situations. News is probably going to be more toxic by a large amount, but even so, you can. It's like you were talking about. You can get over involved. You can actually become so wrapped up in somebody else's problems that it starts affecting you. It's the same effect as paying attention to all the news and listening to the negativity. So the real question becomes how much are we going to expose ourselves to it, and when we do expose ourselves to it, how much of the time are we going to spend actually practicing being the kind of positive, deliberate creators who can do, like Louis says, who can do the step 5 stuff, the take the next thing that came along, get excited about it instead of getting fearful about it, and turning it into another jumping off place for something really cool to happen. That's the challenge. That's the ongoing challenge. So you can do that with Facebook. You can do that with the news. You can do that with family situations that are uncomfortable family situations. You can do it with a lot of things. But there are certainly no lack of opportunities to practice. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say that, like sending love to people that you don't particularly agree with, because it's if you are under the belief at all, I am everything. I am you, I am me, I am everyone. We're all connected. It's like we're connected with people egos, I should say, like Hitler or, and it's like, he didn't come into this world being this evil genius that he turned out to be. He came into this world an innocent little baby that, went through some, I can only imagine, And so, just like with the whole political scene, like what you're talking about, it's like, who can you send love to that you really can't even stand because you are connected to that person?
Yeah.
And the only disconnect that's there is the ego.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's true. It's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge, and we're offered it every single day. Sometimes many times throughout the day. So, it's up to us when we're going to pick up the gauntlet, so to speak. But yeah, the challenge is always there. Jeffrey's actually posted something for us to talk about. He says, thanks for He says, thanks for the conversation. Does anyone else ever get inspired to general action? For example, when I see someone in contrast, sometimes I get inspired to just help. I don't know how sometimes, like the homeless situation of violence against minority groups in my city, but I know I want to. That's what we're talking about. That's it right there in a nutshell. Knowing what your limits are, knowing where it's going too far, a bridge too far, but also knowing that it's an opportunity to, like you said, see someone in contrast. That's a useful phrase that comes out of our law of attraction circles, the idea of contrast being that life comes with the good and the bad and then the in-between, and that's just part of what we're here for, is to experience that. And so seeing someone who's in difficulty, we call that being in contrast, which is kind of a strange, it's almost become a PC term. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Contrast actually refers to both, the whole range. It's both the positive and the negative all mixed together. But we've taken contrast and used it to replace the word negative or unpleasant or, any of the non-preferred adjectives and adverbs, right? But I guess that's where contrast has evolved as a term within our circles. But we see people in contrast all the time. The question is, how are you going to react to it?
I feel like I react to that. I use my gut. I use my instinct and my intuition to react to that because there's, talking about just driving around my community, there's panhandlers on a lot of the corners, on a lot of the busy corners with their sign and everything. And sometimes it feels completely right to me to roll down my window and hand them a couple bucks or a $5 or whatever. And other times I'm just like, it just doesn't feel right to me. So in that, I just look at that as inspired action. I don't have any expectations of it. Mm-hmm. They usually say, God bless you. And I don't know if they're saying that because they believe in God or if they're just saying that because they think that's what you want to hear because of the situation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, sure.
And so, like right now I'm going through my inventory and my clothing and I really wanted to give it, I've done this before and I really wanted to give it to like the foster parent group or whatever. So I found one on Facebook. It was a closed group. They don't let you in unless you're a foster parent. I'm no longer a foster parent. So I just, messaged one of the admins and she was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. Can you give me sizes? Well, I have 20 pairs of jeans. I'm not going to go through and give you all the sizes. I'm going to give you all the jeans and you can
size yourself. Yeah.
Take them, and she just was like, okay, well, I'll put it out there and nothing ever happened of it. And so I just kind of gave up, but I ended up giving them to a friend of mine who I know is helping out with a homeless shelter right now, and she's also very involved in the school board in our school board that our child goes to. And so they have like a clothing exchange or whatever for kids that maybe can't afford clothes or need clothes, or there's a lot of homeless kids that are going to our schools locally here. And so I just felt so good about giving all of that to her instead of just giving it back to Goodwill or whatever. Not that I'm against Goodwill or anything, but it's just like, it just feels good knowing that, mm-hmm. There's some really good brands in there. There's some Nike and, some really good stylish brands and, some kids are going to get some cool stuff. And so I'm just like, that makes me feel good. So that's my inspired action. And I feel like that's my contribution, And so, I don't know.
There's a restaurant near us. One town north of us is Granby, and then a town just north of Granby is the line for the state of Massachusetts. So we're right in the northern part of Connecticut. And in Granby, there is a Chinese restaurant we like to go to periodically. And we've noticed, particularly the last few times that we've gone, that it being wintertime, I don't think it's the restaurant, I think it's the store next door to it, have put out a small clothing rack that they leave out 24 hours a day with old coats hanging on it. And a sign that says, for anybody who needs it to take a coat, just take a coat. Which I think is just wonderful. I mean, that way they aren't even trying to, you don't have to be here when we're open or something. If you need a coat, you need a coat. Just take it. And it's fascinating for two reasons. One, because they put it out there. And two, because I've recalled a couple times where we've gone to the restaurant and I've noticed a distinct reduction in the number of coats on the rack. In other words, people are finding them and taking them. So it worked. Yeah. That's pretty cool. It was just as simple as putting a coat rack out front, in front of your store and hanging some old coats there and saying, please take some coats. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Good stuff. I mean, it's just, with the homeless situation, it's hard not to be judgy. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's practice to be done there because, this is actually something I'm trying to work on a little bit, because very often I will see somebody who is homeless or panhandling or something like that, and instantly my gut will clench up. Like, it's just, it's one of those people again, And my conscious mind hasn't even kicked into gear yet. My conscious mind has barely noticed that they're even there. Oh, wait, is there a homeless person there? But my subconscious is like, oh God, gotta get all tensed up about it.
Instant reaction.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remind myself each time that happens to change my experience. Okay, yes, I just clenched up, but now perhaps I can relax a little bit and think about the situation differently. Maybe the way Louie and Daisy were talking about this morning, thinking about this as a great contrast experience for them. They're going to have some wonderful thing that's going to come out of it. Maybe just thinking in terms of, I actually, Louise and I know somebody who has been in that situation, and he gave us the lowdown on all the people who are panhandlers. He knows all of them. He knows every single one of them, and he can tell us what every single drug addiction is and what every single alcoholic addiction is. He knows all of them. And so we would drive him from one place to another in town. He'd say, well, that's so-and-so. They're addicted to this. That's so-and-so. He knows them all. So you have to kind of take that into, take it with a grain of salt. Say, okay, well, that's what he was telling us about them. But he doesn't necessarily know everything about that person. Maybe I can find another way to see, what's the silver lining for that person beyond what this person has told me about them. And it's just like a constant game, a constant reminder of my perspective is not the same as everybody else's perspective. And it's certainly not the same as the perspective of the person who is the object of our attention. It's not the same as the perspective of everyone else around us. Louise has gotten into a really interesting habit. She's gone to a place like a Dunkin' Donuts or a McDonald's or something like that and gotten a bunch of gift cards, $5 gift cards. So if she sees somebody like that, she hands them a $5 gift card. And she does that because that's her way of making sure they actually get food instead of putting it into their drug fund. That's a pretty clever way to do it, to make sure that you're actually helping them on the area you want to help them. And by doing that, now she can start to visualize them getting better, getting healthier, getting into a better situation, actually being successful in life, successfully getting off the street, successfully getting work, successfully getting a place to live, and so on and so forth. And
I think those acts of kindness just add a little bit of hope to their life.
Yeah, well, it does, no doubt about that. What my point was, it also adds to Louise's life. It's a way to get her own mindset into focusing on the best thing, which is what they really need is our positive attention. We have this tendency to give people our negative attention. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, I feel so sorry for you that you're homeless or that you're hungry or addicted or whatever it is. But really, that's not what they need from us. They don't need the poor you syndrome. What they need is the positive. They need the positive association, the positive belief, the not that they'll necessarily be in the place to receive it, but on the off chance that they're actually having a better day than normal, if they are, by us being in that positive mindset, we're actually sending them energy they can use. If they're in a really, really bad place, then they're not going to benefit from it. Somebody else will. Linda Armstrong likes to point that out to me. Even if you put out something to somebody and they don't use it, it doesn't go unused. Somebody else gets it. Somebody else benefits from it.
Yeah,
which
that
is good to
energy
remember.
gets absorbed by someone.
Exactly, exactly. But
yeah, my brother does that. He doesn't live. He works in downtown Portland, like right in the heart of downtown Portland. And every once in a while, he'll just go and buy like a whole bunch of coffees, a couple cup holders worth or whatever. And he'll just walk down the block and get, it'll be a cold morning and he'll just give a bunch of, these guys that are living on the streets, just give them a cup of coffee and
that's nice.
Tell them to have a good day, and it's just like, and I think that there's almost the stigma about how that makes you feel good as the giver, like you're not supposed to feel good. Like you're supposed to be doing that completely selflessly and not have that affect you, and if that makes you feel good, then you're somehow a bad person for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they've really got it backward. That's what I've come to learn ever since studying Abraham. They actually have it. They think that what they're doing is noble, but what they're actually doing is undermining their own efforts.
Right.
Which is not what they thought. No, it's certainly not what they intended, but that's actually what they end up doing. They end up undermining their own efforts. Jeffrey shared a second question, and the question highlights something that he likes to do. It's kind of a cool idea what he does. He says, does anyone else have a prayer wall or a way to help these larger situations by visualizing a more peaceful, abundant, equal planet? I've never heard of a prayer wall. I can kind of imagine what that is. But if it's anything like what I think it is, that's a clever idea. That's kind of like a vision board for positive intentions for others.
Yeah, for putting things out for others. That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Especially if it makes you feel good to do that, then you're doing exactly what you need to do anyway, is to get into that high-flying place so that you can be of benefit to somebody else. Like Abraham says, it's amazing how often we don't realize that this is the case, but it is. You can't help somebody if you're not in a good place. You can try, you can pretend, you can hope, but invariably what you end up putting out there is not helpful at all, which is, it kind of flies in the face of what the selfless types argue for, but hey, you can't argue with the facts. The facts are what actually happened. And what actually happens is the selfless folks don't actually accomplish as much as they would like to believe they would. You can just tell from the results. You can see what happens. Mm-hmm. Whereas the ones who act out of a belief of, yes, this is helping them, but it also helps me, they're the ones who are the most successful. They're the ones who accomplish the most. I've seen this in churches. I have a number of customers. For many years I was a website designer, and I host websites for some of my clients who are still with me, and a number of them for many years I did a lot of hosting for nonprofit organizations. I still have a few that I host the websites for, and one in particular comes to mind. It's a Catholic church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Of course, Pennsylvania's gone through all that, the sexual abuse allegations and so forth, so they were kind of rocked by all that. But nevertheless, I do know some of the positive things that they've done there, and there's one person in particular who, she's a nun, she's one of the mainstays in the office there, and I tell you, the whole parish holds together because of her. I mean, she's been through unbelievable trials and tribulations, and you can tell it affects her, you can tell it gets to her, but there are so many times I talk to her, and despite all that stuff, she finds a way to just get into a positive feeling place. And you know that she's the one who's having the biggest impact. And she never talks about it, of course. But I find out about it through other people that I talk to at that church periodically. Not very often. It's not like I'm having regular conversations with the people in that church, because I'm not. But like over the years, I've talked to probably 4 or 5 other people. And invariably, they all confirm the same thing. This one sister just is, she's like a cornerstone of the church because of all the energy that she gives to everybody else, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, my grandma went to St. Mary in San Jose, California for years, and I wasn't raised Catholic. I wasn't raised religious at all, and she was, and I know that she raised her kids Catholic, and she was really hoping that, my dad would pass that on to us, and he had no intention of doing that. So my grandpa passes away in 2002, or 2003, and she tells me that the service is going to be at her Catholic church. And I'm just like, Grandpa was not Catholic. And I was just like, I'm going to this memorial because it's my grandpa's, but I'm not happy about it. He wasn't Catholic. This isn't right. And I go to this memorial, and this guy, his name's Father Jim, and he was super popular in the San Jose, even the Bay Area. He was super popular with a lot of the ball players. He was really into baseball and basketball and stuff, and a lot of those guys would, major leaguers would come to his church and stuff, and he did a phenomenal job. And I was just like, from then on, I'm like, I'm a fan of Father Jim. And he since passed away, but he was like and my grandma was like one of his favorites. Like, he just absolutely loved my grandma. And, after Mass on Saturday, she would always go on Saturday night, and after Mass, he would take all of his favorites to like Baskin Robbins or whatever, and I got to go at one of those, and they he walks in with all these people, and he's, got all his garb on, and they won't charge him, and he's like, no, I'm treating all these people to ice cream, and they're like, no, Father, you don't, it was just hilarious. But it was a really cool experience because that's how he was. He never had anything bad to say about anyone. And if you were talking to him about someone like, oh yeah, she really went off, he'd be like, yep, she's outspoken, isn't she? Like he wouldn't dig into the gossip with you or whatever.
Right,
he was always, it was, but kind of same thing. Like he was just, I just absolutely loved him, and I was, so anti-church or whatever, and then I met him, and it was just like a totally different experience. What an amazing guy he was,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the whole taking care of yourself, my mom used to have a saying on her refrigerator, and it said, you can either be a shining example or a horrible warning.
She's right.
And I just love that, because it's like a lot of people are like, well, you shouldn't be too selfish. Like you should, this is all about helping others. But like you said, how can you help others if you aren't already shining? And why would you, like, it's not going to help that person if I get poorer, if I don't have as much money, or if I'm not as healthy, it's not going to help that person cure their disease, And I think a lot of people have that mentality, like you need to suffer along with them or you're not, I don't know. I don't understand it. So.
Well, it's because you're healthy. That's why you don't understand it. That's a good thing not to understand. It reminds me of the story that Joel tells about the guy who was on the plane with a Polish guy, an American and a Polish guy flying on a plane. And the American and the Polish guy are sitting side by side, and they're getting to know each other. And the American is well read in his European history and knows of all the different ways that the Poles have been abused by their neighbors, the Russians, the Finns. I mean, just they were always been attacked or invaded by one country or another throughout their history. It's quite a tragic history. And so he was trying to commiserate with his new friend, saying, I admire you people, all the suffering you people have gone through. And his newfound friend bristled at the idea. He says, no, we have never suffered. We have struggled, but we have never suffered. And it's a very fine distinction, but it's a good one. The distinction is in mentality. To suffer is to be a victim. To struggle is to decide to take control of your life. It's a subtle distinction.
Climb out. I always think of struggling as like climbing out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And suffering is just sitting at the bottom of the hole and bitching about it or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know why, but it reminds me of a story that comes from the West Wing television show. And it's told by the guy who is the chief of staff to the president. His name's Leo McGarry. He's telling it to his assistant, to Josh Lyman. And he says, guy is walking along and he falls in a hole in the sidewalk. And he's like, 5 feet under the ground and no way to get out. And he looks up and he sees a doctor walking by. He says, Doc, I'm stuck down here in this hole. Can you help me out? The doctor writes him a prescription, drops the prescription in the hole, and walks on. Well, that didn't really help a whole lot. So he's there for a while, and then all of a sudden, a priest walks by, and he says, "Pardon me, Pastor, can you, or Monsignor, can you help me? I'm down in this hole." And the Monsignor writes him a prayer, tosses the prayer down the hole, and walks on. Finally, a friend of his comes along and says, "Joe, I'm stuck down in this hole. Can you help me out?" And Joe jumps into the hole. He says, "What are you doing? Now we're both stuck down here." And Joe says, "Yeah, but I've been down here before, and I know the way out."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Like that? That's a
yeah,
real
speaking of struggling, one of the things that I hear a lot of people on those groups saying are, I'm using the 55/5 method, which I've never personally, but seems to be really popular right now.
Yep.
and they're like, and it's not working. It's such a struggle to do it every day. I don't have time. I don't know what to do. It's not, I've been doing it for 2 weeks and nothing's happening and I don't understand. And I'm like, if it's a struggle, then don't do it. That's like totally going against the grain with working with the law of attraction. You need to there's so many tools out there. That's just one vehicle to get to where you want to go with using the law of attraction to your advantage. So you have to find one that works for you. Vision boards work for people. Like you did a vision video that you watch because that's what works for you.
Yep.
Some people, the gratitude journal, some people, the gratitude rock. My husband has the gratitude rock he's got an agate that he found at the beach like probably 15 years ago.
Good for
that
him.
He keeps in his pocket. Well, it couldn't have been that long ago because it was when we first watched The Secret, like in 2006, the next beach trip we did, he got himself a rock and he's always got that rock in his pocket, and so it's just different things for different people and it really matters on what your learning style is that you work best with. Some of us it's doing, some of us reading, some of us writing, some of us it's totally visual, and it's just, I just think that people think that there's a magic button and there's not a magic button until you find your own, like.
I agree. I call it the magic wand syndrome. I've been waving my white magic wand for 2 weeks and nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Basically attributing their own power, because what we're talking about here is learning how to apply our own power that we all have. But attributing our power to a magic wand, it was the wand that did it. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just, waved the wand around and the wand did all the work. But completely missing the point about how all this stuff works. It works through us. We're the ones who are doing it. People want things to happen within a 2-week period, and things can happen within a 2-minute period. So why don't things happen in 2 weeks? Well, because of resistance. There are all kinds of resistances we put up. And people don't want to have to deal with that, because if you have to deal with it, it means you have to deal with the resistances. You have to work on yourself. You have to get those resistances out of the way. You got to let them go in some way. You got to identify what they are sometimes. You have to work through them. Oh, no, I don't want to have to do that. I just want to wave the magic wand. When they say that, you talk about the cringing part. I talked earlier about how I'll see that homeless person and I'll get that cringing feeling in my stomach. I'll get the same cringing feeling on this with these people, because what I realize is happening is they are defending their own victimhood. They're essentially saying, I am a victim, and the only way I can deal with being a victim is if I have a magic wand to save me. I cannot save myself. Now, they don't realize they're saying that. That's certainly not what their conscious mindset is. Well, sometimes it is. Most often, it's not their conscious mindset. But nevertheless, that's what they're saying. And I have to remind myself, I've been there too. All my friends have been there too. Everyone I know has been there at one time or another. And that's my way of kind of relaxing and saying, okay, so, they haven't developed enough yet. They haven't learned how all this stuff works. They will, if they really want to. Like the old adage says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So everything's okay. Everything is actually okay. And if we can remember that, if I can remember that everything is actually okay, even in the face of what seems to me to be a not good situation, if I can remember that everything is okay, that's what keeps me afloat. That's how I avoid falling into that abyss. No.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to remember that one.
Yeah, it works. It works very effectively. Now Jeffrey asked one more question, actually 2 questions. He says, can we all agree that helping someone who is struggling helps us as well? And even if there's no immediate result other than our own satisfaction? Which is an interesting
Well,
point.
that's kind of what I was just talking about. Like when you give that $5 to that panhandler, or, the clothes that I'm donating, or, whatever. It's like, I know that those are going to good things, and I don't have to know where every pair of pants went, or every, pair of shoes went, or whatever. And I don't have to know what that guy spent that $5 on.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I used to get hung up on that, like, oh, I don't know, they might spend, if they go spend it on heroin, then that's their path.
Mm-hmm.
And I still helped them in some way, because if they didn't get that fixed, they were going to be really sick tonight. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even as messed up as that sounds, that's still helping them in some way. They might go home and buy their kids, a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread or whatever. That's the part where you just have to let go. And like he said, you just have to not worry about the outcome and just know that you helped that person out.
It's a fine line. It's a fine line for most of us, because when we help somebody else to feed their addiction, we have a label for it. We call it enabling. We enabled that person, and there is a negative stigma attached to that. And indeed, an addicted person, an addictive personality, will tend to take advantage of that to just keep feeding their addiction and not work on their own stuff at all.
Yeah.
And it's a valid point. But there's also the flip side. And this is the part that I would like to see psychotherapeutic communities kind of come to grips with, which is that if you enable somebody else, it does not necessarily mean that you should accept responsibility for their actions.
Right.
And that's what the people who speak out against enabling really are saying. They're saying that you are responsible for the actions of the person who took the drug because you enabled them to take the drug, or you enabled them to drink, or you enabled them to do whatever it is that they do that's not healthy for themselves or for others. It's a fine line. The thing I like to remember, and it kind of ties into what Jeffrey's comment was, because he says, even if there is no immediate result other than our own satisfaction, that satisfaction is the key point. If we take a tremendous amount of satisfaction in helping somebody, that is actually going to produce a positive result one way or another. It's going to produce a result that makes us feel better, that brings us what we prefer and not what we don't prefer. And ultimately, it gives the same opportunity to the other person. And that's a tough point. That is a tough point for people to deal with. Because like you're saying, you could be enabling somebody to take that drug, but for that moment in time, they thought they would be better off to do that. They thought that would actually make them feel better. That's why they're addicted in the first place, Yeah. Ultimately, who is responsible for their behavior? If we say, I, the enabler, am responsible for their behavior, we just took their power away from them. We just took their power away.
And you could say that you're enabling them to be homeless by giving them a McDonald's gift card.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not going out and earning their own money and I don't know, I just feel like you just have to let go of that. You just,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, even, it's one thing if it's a family member that has stolen from you and is treating you disrespectfully and because of their addiction, and you finally have had enough and they've burned those bridges, which most of those homeless drug addicts out there have done all of that. That's why they're homeless, is because they have, nobody's going to take care of them anymore because everybody's had it with them. Right. And not that it's my responsibility to then take care of them, but if they're standing on that corner and I feel inspired action to give them money, I'm going to do that freely and not go follow them around and make sure that they spend it on something correctly, because number one, that's not, I'm not going to spend my time doing that. And number two, I gave them my money freely to do what they want with it because I was giving to them, and that's it. It's that's important. Where it ends.
It's important to remember too, the people who push them out of their lives, because they're homeless now, right? Their families have abandoned them. The families who abandoned them did them a favor. They don't think of it that way. Certainly on the surface, it doesn't feel like it, but they did them a huge favor. They basically said to them, I'm not going to put up with you basically living your life off of me. I'm just not going to do that anymore. It's not my obligation to keep you alive. It's your obligation to keep you alive. It's your obligation to change your thought process so that you're not just keeping yourself alive, so you can actually thrive for a change. That's your responsibility, not mine.
Yeah.
So they actually did him a favor. It's a harsh kind of a favor.
Oh yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you there. Like I have a relative that's an addict, and she's spent a lot of her parents' money going through rehab several times and wrecking cars, and and they're having a hard time because it's their kid. Mm-hmm. I totally get that, being a parent, like you don't want to give up on him, but I've my uncle went through the same thing, and my grandma always saved him, and after she passed away, he finally got his life together because there was no one there to catch him when he fell, and now he's still kind of a butthead, but, mm-hmm. but he's not addicted, and he's not, using drugs.
Which is good.
And so, it is interesting when you just, what was I watching today? Oh, I was watching Sister Wives. I'm kind of a reality TV junkie. Oh. And I was watching Sister Wives, and one of the wives is just having a really hard time, and one of the other wives said, it's not gonna get, sometimes you can't get up without hitting the bottom first. Mm. And I totally believe that for some, especially addicts. Like, you gotta hit rock bottom, and as a relative or a friend or somebody that you just absolutely love, you have to let go of that and know that some people that hit rock bottom never come back. They pass away, or they just get lost in the streets and, live for years with their addiction, but they're never going to get better unless they get better for themselves, and hitting rock bottom is part of that.
It can be. Absolutely.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. Yeah.
Jeffrey also raised another point. This is a sore point. This is a tough point to deal with sometimes. He says, what about veterans? He says, we really don't know their story. And I think we can honestly say that about everybody that we see. We really don't know their story. We assume things about their story. We infer things. But we really don't know their story. The thing about veterans is veterans in particular really hit a note with most Americans and probably most people around the world. Because they're veterans, because they were defending the country. And our culture places a tremendous premium value on that. So a lot of people feel extra drawn toward helping veterans, which is great. Nothing wrong with helping people. Helping people is a good thing. I'm also reminded, though, that the same rule applies. What's going on inside them? What are they thinking about? What are they focusing on? And what were they focusing on in the first place? I mean, we don't have a draft in this country. Everybody who goes into the military, at least ostensibly, does it voluntarily. Some people may actually do it because of economic reasons. They figure that's their only way out. And many of them are very glad that they did that. But there are also some who are not so glad. The point is, everybody, you can't put everybody into one pool and say they're all the same, because they're not.
Right.
All their stories are different. All their situations are different. All their thought patterns are different. So for myself, I don't think about a person as being a veteran for the same reasons that I don't think of them as being, a skin color, black or Hispanic or something like that. I don't think of them as being whatever stereotypical fill in the blank you want to put in there. I just think of them as a human being. Now, I'm curious to know who they are as a human being, but I try to avoid drawing conclusions based on the stereotypes. And that's why when I was talking earlier about seeing somebody out in the street panhandling, and I get that clutched feeling in my stomach, that's my motivation to kind of turn that around in my own thinking. Because I recognize the fact that is my own reaction, my own stereotypical reaction that I'm trying to change. And when I change that, I'm going to be better off for it. And when I'm better off for it, then anything that I'm putting out there is actually going to be helpful to them as well. That's my real motivation. Right. That's the combination right there.
Because even if you don't think that you're affecting that person, they might be looking at you while you're driving up to the stop sign or whatever, and just the look on your face when you're having that reaction to it is like, oh, great, or whatever. And I do that too. I have some sort of like, I hate it when they're sitting there waving at you. They're holding their sign and they're waving at you. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, if I was in that position where I actually had to panhandle to survive, I would be so humble. Like, I would just be like, I would not be waving and trying to, and so that's a good lesson for me to just go, I don't know what this guy's issue, what his life is. It would be really interesting, and I've even thought about it, is stopping and talking to him if I could find a safe way to do it, because I feel like I'd be pretty vulnerable just walking up to a bunch of homeless people. Hey, what's your story? But it would just be real interesting to have like interviews with those people and find out, because I've seen it on YouTube where people are helping homeless people and they're like, what's your story, man? And everybody has a story.
Absolutely.
Whatever your struggles are, everybody has a story. And those people, some of them are just absolutely phenomenal people that have just got themselves dug into such a big hole that they can't even see how to get out of it,
The interesting thing about that story, too, is that it's the same story that they've been telling ever since they fell into the hole. They've been telling the same story for eons, in a sense. From the moment that things started to go downhill to the point where they actually hit hot bottom, it was the same story all the way along. And in most cases, 90% of the cases, 95% of the cases, they're continuing to sell the same story over and over and over again. What's fascinating is, and I have had the opportunity to see this once. It's fascinating to see what happens when someone who is in that kind of a situation decides to change their story. The story that they tell themselves, the story they tell everybody else. It is remarkable how quickly that person's situation can change.
Especially when they're so low, and just the littlest thing can put them into an apartment or get them a car, get them a job or whatever. And it's just, and that's the Conversations with God movie. That's what happened. He found himself like literally living in the parks, worried about his safety overnight, wondering what he was going to eat, and then just made a little shift. And then he was he ended up finding a job, and then going back to that park, helped those people out, and they were all gone. I'm pretty sure, because they had all moved on, and just really, but you're right. Like when you hit bottom, that's when you have the biggest chance of bouncing back in a huge way. Yeah. And it's not even a huge way to people like us, because we're paying our bills and, living through the flow of money, and we got houses and cars and everything. But to someone that's homeless, even having a room to stay in and a bed to sleep in is a phenomenal jump up from sleeping in a doorway somewhere,
Which is true. But what's even more phenomenal is when they make the mental shift. That's something that Joel really tells beautifully in his book, The Bench. He talks about the mental shifts he made in his life when he was homeless, when he was eating out of dumpsters, when he was just in prison and in really, really bad straits. A number of different times he ran into really, really difficult situations. And every single time, because he had learned shortly after the dumpster incident, he shortly after that learned about how your thought process controls what comes into your life, he started to develop the practice of changing his mindset every time he ran into one of these situations. And it wasn't very long before his situation just changed entirely. And it happened because of his change in mindset. That change in mindset is amazingly powerful. And that's the best part.
That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
That's everything.
Well, we're about 4 minutes over, so I think we probably should draw to a close. But this has been a good conversation. And thank you for kind of guiding in this direction. This is a good one. So I hope you'll be doing some lurking in some of the other shows this week. And if you do, don't hesitate to drop in and say hello. We'd love to hear from you. Okay? Because you always have something good to share. So that, we love it when you do that. Same thing for other listeners too. Thank you for Jeffrey, in particular, for the questions he was sharing today, and everybody who is either a live stream listener or a recorded listener. So we just urge you to keep sharing those questions. Send them in to us, too, even if you're listening to the podcast, which most people do. And we'll be glad to include them in the next episode. And with that thought in mind, we will see you next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.